right, welcome back to the Talkin TV channel, people. On today's episode, we're going to be talking about For All Mankind, the hit new Apple TV drama that basically asks the question, what if Russia had won the space race? I'm Dom, the movie nerd.
I am Chris, the TV nerd. Welcome in, everyone.
And today we're going to be breaking down the season 2 premiere, what the future of this show holds, whether it has any legs to last during the streaming wars, and most importantly, whether Apple's finally got that it show worth watching. All of that and more on tonight's episode. All right, Chris, we're back end of February. That was a pretty good transition overall, although StreamYard up to its usual tricks. What's going on, people? Happy to have you all back for the latest episode of the Talkin TV podcast. Chris, we had a busy weekend, to say the least.
Yeah, we got a lot in store for you guys this week.
Yeah,
I hope you're ready.
It was all very well worth it, though, I would like to say. Again, we've got 2 episodes of WandaVision left. We're going to be rolling right into the next Disney streaming show. We're getting ready to approach March, which is going to be a tremendous month for both of us. Chris, I mean, you're going to be 27, dude. Big 27. Like, I don't know, like, anything particularly special about that number, but, like, how you feeling about that, dude?
The 27 Club, man.
Yeah.
I hope I see a different fate than most actors and musicians of that age.
Yeah. You're
you know the 27 Club. It's like Kurt Cobain, Stevie Ray Vaughan, Jimi Hendrix.
That club. Got it. Yeah. Good to know. Okay, good to know. I didn't realize that was the specific thing that like categorized it, but I'm glad that I know now overall. And it's weird because like you're talking about like kind of cultural icons like that kind of got me in the mood. It got me nostalgic because I'm not going to lie, Chris. I will say that for the exceedingly impressive amount of space properties we've gotten in the last couple of years, we've actually talked about this a decent amount. I will say that kind of the one movie that I felt like was supposed to hit that shouldn't, that being First Man, with First Man being the only one of these last couple space movies that actually like features NASA in probably its most prominent role since 95's Apollo 13. And I have to say, I've been very disappointed in that movie's kind of treatment of NASA and like how it felt like it needed to overemphasize Neil over kind of NASA and kind of the role that played. And that is already the area in which I think this show is winning as far as I'm going. And we're going to get into the many, many, many different things as to why this show that we're about to talk about tonight, For All Mankind, to me, should be the new it show that people are watching right now. Besides the fact that there is still relatively little content to kick off 2021. But before we do that, Chris, is there anything that you wanted to let the people know as far as kind of maybe some of our future content that we've got coming up?
Yeah, man. So this Wednesday, Dom and I, last night, if you're watching this live with us, which if you are, how you guys doing? Thanks for hanging. We recorded a first-time watch of Silence of the Lambs. I had never seen it before. Dom hadn't seen it in 5 years. We had some pretty cool conversations throughout the film. I was really hard-pressed to speak just because of how immersive this film was, and we're dropping it on the 30th anniversary. So what can be better than that? And of course, like Dom said, we have 2 more weeks of WandaVision on March 1st, guys. Since we're in the whole space sphere right now, we're interviewing an actor of not only The Expanse, but also of Kim's Convenience fame. That's right, man. Sujith Varghese, a very talented Hollywood actor, is coming on our little humble show, and I cannot wait to pick his brain. I'm obviously, as you guys know, a huge Kim's Convenience fan, and I started, actually, Dom, I think we got to give the show a second chance. I started the first season of The Expanse. I'm a couple episodes in, and I don't think I was in the right headspace when I watched it the first time. I'm enjoying it a little bit.
I've heard that it's a good show, and I've heard that it's only gotten better since like Amazon officially took it over from Sci-Fi. So like I'm definitely very interested to see where that show is going to go. And again, with these perfect segues that you keep coming up with, because again, like space and science fiction, travel, exploration. Luke, happy to have you here as always. I don't know what reordermic stand is, but I'm glad.
I hope you're okay.
Yeah, but I'm glad. But the YouTube return is on hold for a little while longer. But hey, we're so glad to see you getting it underway to begin.
We'll
with.
Be here when it's done, man.
Yeah, we're not going anywhere. I'm pretty sure we're here for good, which is kind of how I like it. So, Chris, before we get into it, I think we need to discuss the elephant in the room here, which is, again, the kind of the weird position, let's say, for lack of a better word, that Apple TV has placed itself in during the streaming wars. We're now, again, we're about 2 months into 2021 right now, after a year of Corona and a year of really putting the streaming services to the test. I think it's safe to say that all of them have pretty much carved out kind of their little place within the streaming sphere. I think Netflix definitely has some competition now, which up until last year, it really did not. I think Amazon's carved out its weird little spot. Hulu's carved out its little spot. Disney Plus obviously has its spot. HBO Max has its spot. But Apple, to me, has constantly been in that weird position where I feel like, with the exception of Ted Lasso, which was kind of the first big show that really blew up on its own, Apple really hasn't had anything that allows it to stand out. Like, Morning Show made a big stink last year at the Emmys, but let's face it, that show was going to do well no matter what network it landed on, just based on the creators and the subject matter and the massive cast that was involved with it. Which is why, and again, I made it clear on our podcast about it that Ted Lasso was not at all one of my favorite shows to come out of last year, which I think is why I was skeptical, for lack of a better word, when you recommended this show to me, of all shows, in order to continue to kind of push me towards Apple. And so I guess before I really dove into my stance further, I wanted to know, because you'd only watched a couple of Apple TV shows, you knew nothing about this show, you just saw that this was a show about space. So what was it that you would say really kind of attracted you to this show in the first place, as far as being like, yeah, this is the show that we should watch next for Apple?
Yeah, it kind of harkens back to our sentiment here on the show about HBO, where it's like, even if it's not their best footing, their best effort, it's still a bar of quality above the rest. And like, it's a little too hard to say that per se for Apple TV Plus, because I've seen 5 things now, 1 being a movie, 4 being series. But out of these 4 series, not only are they slightly different and slightly unique compared to the other, shows in their realm and their genre, they're so well written. They're just, even if you don't like Ted Lasso, I think people at least recognize that it's different for its ilk. It's got something that is an it factor, whether it's for you or not, that is above other sitcoms. The Morning Show, if you guys want to talk about a drama that will knock you off your feet, I cannot wait for you to watch that one, Dom. It's unlike anything I've ever seen, because it's so deeply political and so deeply divisive, but yet it plays it fairly on both sides. And it just manages to do this thing that isn't preaching and isn't tantalizing the audience, where all those other shows fall short, in my opinion. So it's like, there's so far I've found this bar of quality in Apple TV Plus. And I'm sure there's something on there that's really not good, but they also don't have many shows. I mean, it seems like it's heavily curated. So it really leads me to believe that it's worth taking the risk on. And I was craving something space. We needed something for this time of the year. I kind of wanted to find that show that we could bring to the light. I'm hoping this could be it, because I feel like we kind of hit it out of the park picking this one. But that was my impetus for this, man. Like, I haven't been let down by them yet, and I wasn't expecting it. And well, we'll get into it.
It's a pretty good impetus, I'm not going to lie, because I think immediately off the bat, what this told me about Apple, forget the show in and of itself, we're going to get into that in a bit, but the thing that this show in particular told me about Apple, and I kind of noticed this with Ted Lasso, but I feel like kind of my micro problems and kind of, I'll say, my lack of attention and kind of my treatment of Ted Lasso as background noise kind of, I will say, was a big disservice to the show, as far as me being able to kind of pick up on the little things that Apple does, because it's like everything else. You've got a brand, you obviously are going to have a mentality that comes with that brand. Netflix, we have their mentality. They just treat everything as easily watchable trash, and they don't care about their actual quality, so they're just going to throw everything at the wall and see what sticks. And if something doesn't, or so seemingly doesn't, or doesn't have enough of a following, it gets axed. Fuck them forever for canceling Glow. I'm going to say that every single time I mention them now. Hulu has all the FX stuff, and it just occasionally gets like random good movies, and they're set with that. HBO and Disney have their respective corners carved out, because HBO kind of inherited all of the HBO content, as well as kind of cobbling together a lot of the other like kind of excess content that was floating out there. They've got all the DC stuff. They're making a big push into adult animation. And then Amazon is kind of still trucking along. But I think, to me, where Apple is kind of succeeding, where Amazon is failing, is that they're both very similar, and that they're both these gigantic conglomerates that have got all of this money to throw willy-nilly at these projects. But Apple, I think, is almost taking everything that I feel like Amazon is only using in pieces and putting it into all of their properties. Because the one thing that I can say about all of their stuff is that all of their stuff feels like it's curated words with a very, very precise look, which is something that, again, I can't say about really any of the other streaming services so far. And I think it's definitely worth noting, because I think this is the first time where I'm actually actively invested in a streaming service's future, particularly from a giant tech company, because I feel like I've been so conditioned these last couple of years to say, okay, all of these tech giants are so comfortable in their respective niches of what they do that I know exactly what I'm going to get from them, and that's all it's going to be going forward, and I'll have to take my kicks where I can. And I was fully expecting that to go in from Apple without even taking a step back to realize, oh no, Apple really hasn't had enough content yet to really make a stamp. They've got Morning Show and Ted Lasso, and that's it. Like, none of their other shows have really hit so far. And so for this to kind of like be like the first niche show, for lack of a better word, that I've seen, and for this to have that much of an impact on me, like, it definitely shows. And I will say that I feel like a lot more actively looking forward to the stuff that Apple has coming up, much more so now than I was before.
Yeah, totally, man. I agree 100% with that. I mean, like I said, I'm still new to this Apple world. I feel like I've gotten lucky so far. But then again, you know, like our friend Elliot of Movie Files, man, he reviews all the Apple shows. And honestly, I find it hard in his videos for him to say something bad about these shows, like shows I haven't seen, like C or Defending Jacob, that, like, I'm not going to lie, after this drama knocked me off my feet and the morning show previously, I'm a little less hesitant to jump into those. So it might just be that this is like sort of the hidden gem of the streaming world that for some reason, again, it blows my mind. It's a part of one of the largest conglomerates of the world, yet it's like no one's touching this part of that Apple sphere. I don't really get it, you know?
Look, just as far as if you want to still know just how big Apple's reach is, you ask any Gen Zer what the new Android phone is, and they're not going to know it, but they're going to know exactly what the new iPhone is, which is the iPhone Pro 12 Max. And I can tell you right now that I just got a new job selling cell phones, and I can tell you this much: what's it called? The people who are coming and looking for Androids are not in our age range. I can tell you that right now. I can tell you that right now. So, like, just as far as like just how big Apple's reach is, I still think that we kind of really underestimated them, and I'm starting to think that they're kind of really under the radar start of their streaming service was probably the most well done, and I'm starting to realize, oh no, wait, they know what they're doing, and they're saving their hand. Because let me tell you something, it's one thing when you could churn out 30 TV shows and they're maybe on the level of like a sitcom, but when you could put on maybe like 10 shows a year, but they're all on the level of Game of Thrones, even if they don't have the exact same subject matter, that should tell you something. Because right, if we could just kind of pivot into For All Mankind, I think the biggest thing that I notice is I'm like, okay, besides the overall quality, which is there, oh my God, like you could just tell even in the simple like scenes that are set in the bar, like there is money put into all of those shots. And there was like actually like, I mean, obviously it's a period piece show, so there has to be like obviously that level of detail that kind of like I really haven't seen on a show since Mad Men, but I'm like, oh my God, I'm like actually getting actively involved in a story, and I'm getting lost in a world again. And I actually give a shit about following these characters and the premise that this show sets itself up for, and like how brilliantly it establishes itself from its opening scene. I'm like, yes, this is it. This is what I was talking about when I said we've got an actual show to watch. Like, oh man, I just had this incredible sense of relief. And like, yes, there can still be actual good storytelling in shows that aren't just franchise and IP set, that are set to like just be these launchpad boards for 30 different IP stuff that are like guaranteed to be watched, you know? I'm like, finally, there's some actual intrigue there, you know? Like, I mean, I got this all from like the opening scene, dude. Like, I mean, are you feeling the same way about this?
Yeah, 100%, man. Brilliant is absolutely the word to be thrown around here tonight, because let's just guys, we're talking about season 1 of For All Mankind.
Yes,
in the later half of this episode, we're going to give you our thoughts on season 2, episode 1, which just dropped this past Friday. But we obviously got to lay the foundation and let you guys know what we think. So I guess just sort of jumping in, man, my initial reaction was, all right, well, I hope this is good, because, I picked this one for us to cover, and I was just sort of going off my trust and my gut in Apple. And, well, you know, sometimes you take gambles and they pay off, man, because instantly I was just fully immersed in this. I mean, yeah, man, the nuance of the time period and just the way that these characters feel so lived in, and they feel so authentic and real. And like you said, too, the storytelling is just, it harkens back to like what I've been talking about a lot lately, which has been lost, which is patience in cinema, and just really the ability to allow the writing to take your characters where they need to be, rather than vice versa. You know, like we're not relying on Captain America being Captain America. We're relying on the situations we put him in to entertain us and suck us in. And ultimately that always makes it more interesting. And for this to be a drama, which, if you guys have watched dramas, you know there's not that many. When the moments come that are intense, they're there, but they're for the most part fewer and far between. And I think a lot of this, to rely on such heavy character work, and be such long episodes.
Yeah. Oh, but, yeah. We're going to get to that with the episode length because we kind of can't avoid it at this point.
No, but they still just suck me in, and it doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
You know, like, well, you take it away, man. What's your take on all that?
Well, I mean, just to kind of like basically like explain to everyone what this show is about. So this show is probably one of the most brilliant opening scenes that I think I've ever seen, where it opens with what you believe is the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing, which is then, in a brilliant twist, revealed to actually be set in an alternative version of history in which Russia actually beats America to the moon landing and lands the first successful person on the moon, which of course kickstarts a cataclysmic series of events that drastically affect the Apollo and moon landing programs and kind of jumpstart and kind of transfix America's views on the space race and towards the rest of the world. And you start to see the kind of like all these brilliant little disseminations of all of these things that don't happen for years and decades to come, all of a sudden happen within the course of a couple years. And all of a sudden between the years, I believe it's 1969 and 1974 is the last year that the first season takes place in. You see Ted Kennedy win the presidential election after Richard Nixon. You see, women and people of color all of a sudden jumping up and getting to prominent positions in NASA. You have the Equal Rights Amendment bill passed, and it does this really, really fascinating thing that I'm honestly kind of a little bit sad that a lot of other shows haven't taken advantage of, which is kind of the alternative history role, and really puts it to the forefront and really plays around with all the different possibilities that you could show of like, okay, if this had happened, what would this have changed for our country's history? And that just opens up a rabbit hole of different possibilities for the story and of where this goes. And I'm just so beyond interested in it. It feels like I kind of want to bring that back and factor that into my original point, which is this is, I think, the first new show that I've seen in a while that shows finally there are still people that want to take risks with long-form storytelling, which I feel like for streaming, as much as I enjoy where the streaming model was going and how it kind of fixed, I would say, a lot of the problems of traditional television, I felt like it was also getting away from kind of the thing that made me fall in love with television in the first place. And for this to finally be getting back to that, it was just, again, so refreshing and such a relief overall. And I think the first point of where I wanted to go with this, as far as kind of what the themes this show tackles, are kind of besides the fact that, yeah, space stuff is cool, I wanted to talk about just how interesting it is for the show to take such a drastic leap as far as showing, okay, no, we're going to go for the idea of what if we as a nation felt something on the level of like the JFK assassination, but with the space race, you know, because that's the interesting thing about history, specifically recent history, right? Is that when an event happened, it wasn't like something like today where we're inundated with so much stuff like this now because of social media that we take one thing like this, we kind of brush it off and it goes away in like a week. Like we can maybe expect this thing to last a week, but like back then when something happened, you could be damn well sure that every single set of eyes was on the TV because, you know, nobody had a smartphone, and just kind of, you saw the ripple effects of these types of events on groups of people as a whole, as opposed to just kind of like every individual person. And it's a really interesting feeling. And I think it's something that I feel like, just forgetting TV shows, just properties in general have only like wanted to barely like scratch the surface of, because I think before it might have just been just something that was too big to tackle, you know, but now I feel like we have been at this point in storytelling just in general now where we can really tackle that on a large scale. And I feel like this is finally that show that is not a comic book or a big IP property. It's just it's a historical docudrama, for lack of a better word, with the alternative history mixed in, and it really seeks to just go there and shows, okay, what kind of effect would this have had on us? Like, what would have happened if it does, to me, the equivalent of what Watchmen does, where it asks, okay, what would we have done if we'd won the Vietnam War? And then it goes one step further and it's like, okay, what if we had won the Vietnam War and we'd had superheroes involved? Like, to me, it does, it asks all those questions that a property like this should, and then it goes like even further with it. And that's just still, I feel like, scratching the surface and barely doing this show a disservice with how I'm explaining it, you know?
No, totally. Yeah, I agree with all that. I think some of the reasons why I agree with all that is because even though it is revisionist history, alternative history, whatever word you want to slap on it, the thing is, though, they know the time period that they're in so flawlessly that when they imagine the reactions by the presidents, by, you know, the Russians and how they react to them first being on the moon and the ripple effect it sends through the country. And for the first time in a long time, America's not the number one superpower. We've been surpassed by Russia. They really embodied the tone of America at that time and the world at that time, so that when they go off and then they phallicize and they sort of embellish on these things that, oh, what if, it still feels so real because they did the research. At least if they didn't do the research, then they fooled me, because there's no way that they did not know exactly. And like those tie-ins that they have with the presidents, where I think they did a really smart decision, by the way. For those of you guys who don't know, the show goes through a couple different presidents, and it's not often, but a few times throughout each season so far, it seems, as we saw in the first episode of season 2, they'll have like this still black and white picture of the person, and they'll have like a voiceover, but that voiceover clearly wasn't actually from them. But like, even the small appearances of the presidents, although it's still fake revisionist history, it still feels so true to who that president was, to what we know about them, to how they were, if they were brash, if they were more tepid, if they were more cautious. It's every little aspect of the time period they capture, and they're able to mold and craft around this new story. And it's just so fascinating, because normally I would hate this kind of thing because it's just so far-fetched, What if first off, what if Russia landed on the moon first, but then what if the space race just doesn't stop? All right, that's a tall order. Like, you're really going to have to sell me on it.
Especially when you discuss the logistics of like how to actually wage war in space. That just becomes a whole different show in and of itself.
That too. And they just go every direction with it. They go all the obvious what ifs that you would say, but they do it in a way that, honestly, man, it's special. It really is special.
And I wanted to bounce off that point because I think specifically your point about the president's point. So again, like this really fascinating micro thing that the show does, which is where, again, we've seen so many properties recently that have taken the whole, what if we mix and intermingle kind of like these real life footage with like kind of, the faked out like modern day actors and footage in order to trick it out and make it look like it's of the time period. And that's become a gimmick that's been starting to annoy me recently. But in this show, it's done so well, like kind of like how they repurpose the real life presidents. And then as you saw, fictionalized presidents, because in this reality, Ted Kennedy, famously like the laughingstock of the Kennedy family, who again was ruined completely by the Chappaquiddick incident, ends up in this reality becoming president after Richard Nixon is caught in the Watergate scandal, which is completely insane just for so many different levels. And I, again, like just the revisionist history element of it alone gives the show the edge. But like, I think the first thing that this show kind of understands is that it's still dealing with human beings first and foremost. And that to me has always been the key to nailing, obviously, because kind of like these historical set pieces, which again, we've been seeing a lot more of, but it was hearkening back to like my high school years when I would watch Boardwalk Empire. And even though that's a 1920s period set drama show, it's still a gangster drama, and it's still got like just those humanist elements that I love, and how at the end of the day they do such a good job of anchoring those characters and making you understand each and every one of their motivations, and it just makes it so much more internal. And I finally got that from these characters in this show, like and how they mix and intermingle. Like they made Neil Armstrong an actually fascinating character, like something that even Ryan Gosling couldn't do in that in that First Man movie that came out a couple years ago. Like Ryan Gosling, unfortunately, what he's doing for that movie, like again, it's all based on what Giselle is telling him to do. But I think that that movie is too surface level, for lack of a better word, and it's trying to be like it's doing that kind of pretentious thing where it's like metaphorical without actually like giving you a reason to actually sympathize with them, and he's just making the sad boy faces. But here it's like the way you actually get to see these characters be actual real human beings, and like they do these incredible things where they go into space and they pull off like these amazing things. And once again, it's the thing that I love about these types of movies is it is the ultimate demonstration of what we are capable of as human beings. And when we all get together and we can actually put aside all our grievances in order to truly look at what is better for the furthering of our species and what we're capable of, and being able to see all of that. And then you got to see these people leave, and you're once again reminded, oh no, this is just their job, and they have to go back and be suburban dads and take care of their kids. And then the show takes one step further on top of all that and says, okay, what if we put women in space at this time? What if we were basically we were forced to jump ahead to cover the equivalent of several decades worth of equal rights movements within the course of a week? And you get to see all of that play out in real time. And even still, like further and further and further, literally to the point where now even in season 2, we're starting to effectively see kind of the shift and transformation, kind of like that missing portion of like kind of the transition from the present to the future in Star Trek. And we're seeing that play out on this show in real time while this is still a period piece. And like the fact that all of that is able to be contained within this 11 episode run, and it's all coherent. It's all fascinating to watch. The acting for the most part is all incredible. Like, Chris, I mean, talk to me here. Like, am I making sense with what I'm saying here? Like, because it's a lot to cover, I feel like.
No, yeah, you totally are, man. I agree with pretty much all of that. What's up, stranger boy?
Yes, good to have you back. I've been missing your stranger comments per se.
Yeah, no. So I kind of wanted to start picking apart these characters and these actors because I do think while this is super well written, the casting is very crucial in this type of production because it's so demanding of a certain person to play each and every specific character that you kind of get some names in here that I think have sort of garnered not negative press, but skepticism when you hear their names attached to a project. I would specifically say Joel Kinnaman.
Yeah. Joel Kinnaman, it's so funny. I feel like he was the latest in that line of actors that Hollywood was trying to make famous, but they just could not hit it. Like you saw that with Sam Worthington and Taylor Kitsch. First it was Sam Worthington in the late 2000s, early aughts, and then they tried to do it with Taylor Kitsch. And I feel like Joel Kinnaman was that guy. You saw like the Jai Courtney had his brief minute, and then ironically enough, you had Joel Kinnaman come out. And Joel Kinnaman was, I feel like, the last guy that they tried to do that with, where they just were putting him in all these big name properties, like Suicide Squad and Altered Carbon and House of Cards, and he just could not hit in any single one of them. But man, does he finally have a role where he is actually could give a good performance,
Yeah, totally, man. Because I just kept thinking to myself, goddamn, someone must have had faith in this dude to put him in this project. Because I think anyone reading this who's going to greenlight this has to be freaking out and just, wanted to celebrate because this is oh my God, we got lightning in a bottle on our desk here and we get to produce this. Who are we going to get for it? You don't think Joel Kinnaman, but let me tell you guys, I watched Altered Carbon season 1 and I've seen House of Cards. And I never hated him, but you're right. He's not that impressive. He's just a little, I don't want to say stale because it's mean. Let's say monotone, a little.
He's the guy who is going to be reliable is what it is. He's reliable is the word that I would use. He shows up. He's very stiff, but he's very staunch. He's got that very kind of old school husky attitude. He's almost like somebody that if he was around a decade or two before, he would have been competing with as the Kevin Costner replacement. He would have been competing directly with Oliphant for those types of parts, kind of the Western kind of revivalist, but I feel like he missed that by a couple of years, and as a result, that was why he was struggling to find work. But you get this part, and this part is perfect for kind of that old school kind of American cowboy-esque mentality, which is to be quite frank, a role that has not existed for the last couple of years, and he finally gets something like that, and it's finally something that can play to his strengths, at least from what I've seen from it.
Yeah, exactly, because I think there's a lot of question coming into this, does he have chops? Is he a good actor? Is it just his agent? I mean, clearly he's a good-looking guy, so there's that in Hollywood. That gets you far, and was there some of that? You know what I mean? But no, not at all. I mean, this just shows what, I'll use a sports analogy for all my sports fans out there. Some quarterbacks suck for years, aka Ryan Tannehill, 5 terrible seasons on Miami. It wasn't him. He's a great player. Now he's in the Titans, top 4 quarterback. The problem was the system he was in. He was not in the right place for his talents. And this show clearly shows that about Joel Kinnaman, man, because let me tell you, he has to play a leader. He also has to play a husband who has a child who he knows he's not able to give enough time to, and he's frustrated about that, but it's not their fault. So, but he also can't take his frustrations out as a leader in the workforce. So where does he go? He goes to the bar to drink. And okay, at the beginning of the season, he has a bit of a slip up, and we sort of get to see his character redeem himself. And in the end, obviously, ultimately do what all good stories do, which is prove that it was just a misstep. But I mean, this guy is so perfect at sort of being the leader role, taking that for himself, because you can't get mad at your wife and kids, for having issues around the house that you can't be around for because you're in such high demand at your job. And you obviously, so his chops, man, that's what I'm trying to say. He just threads this needle that's so real and so human, and something that I think, well, I almost feel like I'm not watching something right now. If anything, I feel like I'm looking out my window at someone actually going through one of the most high pressure situations in the world at that point in time, and expressing this. It didn't feel like acting, and that's good art when you're sitting there, when you're watching something and you're not thinking to yourself, this is Joel Kinnaman, I hope this is good. The second that you can kick all those preconceived notions and, you're sitting there, your phone's in front of you, and it's not even a phase when your YouTube notifications are going off, your text messages are flying in, you're laser locked on these extremely long episodes. That first of all, your lead's got to carry that, man, especially in a drama like this. And he really shows that, like I said earlier, it's the role. It's an actor should not be judged on one bad performance, where they also shouldn't be judged on one good performance, right? It sometimes just isn't the right material for them. But goddamn, this was the right material. And then the supporting cast, man. I mean, they all feel like the astronauts feel like they actually go to the outpost to hang out, you know? Like the wives feel like they actually stress about their husbands flying up there in space and having these parties to sort of like, okay, well, if something happens, we're all here together. Like they feel like real people, like you said at the beginning of this. And sure, we've seen some period pieces that have that, Mad Men, right? But it's been a while since I think we've seen something like this.
It's been 5 years since Mad Men went off the air, which is still crazy to think about because I still like have vivid memories of seeing commercials for that show's last season on the air when I was a senior in high school. And it's crazy to think that we haven't gotten like a really good period piece since then. But like to touch on like all your points you were just making about Ed, I think the thing that makes Ed kind of the perfect character is also the thing that makes this entire cast, because this entire cast, this is the first show again that I've seen in a while where, even though yes, we complain a little bit about the length of each episode, which I'll get into that in a bit, but it's the first show that does the homework to actually give you the time to get to know each and every one of these characters, which it's ironic the fact that we would be complaining about getting the proper amount of time with each character, considering the fact that we're talking about the long-form storytelling method. This is TV. This is the place where you go to get more time with your characters. But it almost feels like TV has kind of been abusing that privilege lately, to put it coyly, I guess. And it's almost like they've had to pull back and almost like kind of like put a reminder in place. It's like, no, like put the restrictions back on. But this show, once again, shows no, when you actually get people who know what they're doing and you get actual good storytellers, and you get people who are invested in character, first and foremost, that you can have the time and put in the work to justify the length of these stories. Because the thing is that even though not every storyline in every episode is going to be as flashy and interesting as, like, say, the space storylines, the fact that they put in the work to make sure that each and every single one of them feels so damn human, right down to the little Mexican immigrant girl who, like, you have that incredibly tragic ending of what happens with her dad and what ends up happening with her, and how she has to overcome such this challenges of her own. And again, like what they're able to do with the women characters in the show and how they end up arguably becoming the most compelling characters on the entire show in each and every single one of their own ways. And a couple of surprise actors that popped up, because it was one of those things where reading all the names on paper, I didn't recognize all the names instantly, but once I saw them, I'm like, oh my God, it's a cast full of that guys, where it's like, yeah, I know that person, and I know that person, and I know that person, and a couple of actors popping up from my beloved Boardwalk Empire. I love that show to tears. It left too soon before it really had the chance to hit, and I definitely recommend it for any people that out there that are striving and feeling the need for a good period piece and a good mob genre and a good gangster piece. I heavily recommend that. And it was great when I saw a couple of the actors that were like only bit parts on that show pop up, and I'm like, oh my God, Julia, J. Edgar Hoover. And of course, like, again, there are character actors in this cast like to fill up to the moon, like Chris Bauer, who's been in 15 million different things. You recognize his face instantly. You may not know his name, but you recognize his face and his tone and his gruff tone instantly as Sabatka from The Wire, as Deke Slayton, Colm Feore from Umbrella Academy as Dr. Von Braun, and everything that happens there. And again, even the new people who I wasn't as familiar with, and getting to know them, you know, all the fantastic young actors, like just to give a shout out to a few of them. Michael Dorman as Gordo, Sarah Jones as Tracy, Shantel Van Santen as Karen, Jodi Balfour as Ellen, Chris Marshall as Danielle. Let's go. Special shout out, obviously, to your girl, hashtag not Penny's boat, Sonia Walger, Penny herself from Lost as Molly Cobb, who is a character that comes in a couple episodes in, but proves to be a vital character to where this show is going to go in the future.
Yeah.
And again, like, I just want to shout out like every actor, because it was one of the things where I'm like, oh my God, finally, just a show with good acting in it, just actual performances, because they understand that they're playing real human beings. Like, it created kind of like the sense of legitimacy, for lack of a better word, and that feels like such a trite and overused term, but like, I missed it. I've missed my prestige TV, you know, and I'm really kind of pissed that, like, for lack of a better word, Better Call Saul was like the only bit of like real prestige TV that we got last year, and like everything else, like, oh, what's the next thing after that? Oh, Ozark, great, more schlocky, shitty crime, you know. As like, I don't even consider Ozark like schlock crime anymore, because I can at the very least enjoy schlock crime. Like, there was nothing enjoyable about any of the schlock that I saw in that last season of Ozark. So, I mean, I don't know, man. I feel like I'm constantly spitting wind here as far as like everything that I want to go, because like because it's been so long since I've gotten something that I feel like that we've been able to watch in real time that actually deserves the praise that we're heaping on it.
No, I couldn't agree more, man. And, you know, it is a cast of My Guys, but it seems like it's a cast of My Guys that no one's really wanted, or that has only gotten a small part here or there, or like the My Guys that are trying to endlessly prove themselves. It seems like the forgotten cast of My Guys.
Working class. Like, they're the actors that you don't you don't know their names, and they're not famous, but you've seen them in a million times. You recognize their faces instantly, and you know that they get work.
Exactly. And that's what makes this so special, because there, you know, like, I'm not saying that there are egos on productions that have big stars and are successful, but like, there's just this, there's an aura to this show where it's like, you don't even need a name attached to this. That's how well written it is. And that's how well everyone meshes with their characters. But then the fact that you can now justify Joel Kinnaman as a phenomenal actor off of this, leading his cast of misfit My Guys, it's so impressive, and it's really inspiring watching this. And yeah, there is a lot to say about this, and obviously we can gush all day, but I did want to sort of talk about the Deke Slayton character.
Yes.
Because something this show does, and his performance is phenomenal. That's not really where I want to...
I just want a quick shout out. I love Chris Bauer. I love Chris Bauer and everything I've seen. A lot of people, their first introduction to him will have been as Sabatka on The Wire, and he was incredible in that. But for me, my introduction will be as Sheriff Andy Balfour on True Blood. That was my introduction to him. He was perfectly comparable. He was perfectly suitable for that part, but he's been incredible in every single thing that I've seen him in since then, and he's just a phenomenal actor. Love him. Like, so I'm so glad that you wanted to bring him up as our next focus character.
Yeah, I mean, of course, Chris Bauer's phenomenal in this. If you guys haven't seen it, his performance, and you know, spoiler alert. So if you don't want to hear a spoiler right now, tune out. The way that he tragically leaves the show couldn't have been done any better. But I don't really want to gush about, because I feel like we can say the same things over and over again about all the performances. I kind of wanted to use his character sort of as an example for what he represents. Right, this show does a lot of very interesting things where, you know, it knows the political scope, it knows how to work these characters and their relationships, and it knows how to work the social climate that they're all sort of in, and it knows how to even have the common person being the barkeeper, the bartender who sort of meshes with the astronauts and eventually finds love with one of them. It knows how to work all those webs, but it also knows how to sort of have the old guard and the new guard sort of come together and put their differences aside. And it kind of harkens back to when you brought up the whole earlier plot line of them having the female astronauts come in. And I think that this show, while, you know, in the first episode of the second season, they do tout capitalism, at the same time, they do also understand that, like, the best men or women for the job doesn't matter race, religion, creed. Like, this show really walks the walk and talks the talk in regards to everything that we hear Hollywood and all of them saying. And to do that in this time, also revising that history, to me, as like someone who's also into politics, it was like, wow, it could have been that simple, huh? We could have just put our differences aside and progressed, and we didn't have to make it a whole big thing. It shows how much political theater there was in history, sort of them revising this history and using that one scene. And again, spoiler alert, where Chris Bauer's character is unfortunately going to, not make it. They're up in space, and his captain, who he's piloting the mission on, comes out to him, and he at first is of his generation, saying, damn, I wish you didn't tell me that. You know, this is my last seconds alive, and this is what you're going to tell me. And then he kind of comes to and he says, you're a damn good pilot. Essentially, he apologizes, although he's too proud of a character to do that. And he just gives her advice where it's like, hey, never let anyone know. You're an asset and we need you. And it's just so brilliant, man, that they can like show that change. You know, all it takes is a second to stop and think. And like, a lot of shows try to impart a message, and I feel like lately we've talked about a lot of films that have messages. Some I backed, some I didn't. But this was such a subtle message, but yet I got that from it because they weren't bashing it down my throat. But yet it was there, it was present because they did their homework, because they knew the history. And that layer was really refreshing. And it just made it a better experience, just because, again, they're people. People make mistakes. People grow. People say things they don't mean. and it's scripted, so it's hard to sometimes make that feel very organic and very tangible, but yet they do it in this. I don't know. What's your take on that sentiment?
Yeah, you're 100% on with everything. Look, I'm not going to lie. Deke was, of all the characters, it's tricky because again, the thing that I learned to love about this show, again, it's why I think I gravitate towards HBO shows in general, because this is the thing that every HBO show does so well, where I start the show and I think I'm going to have a specific favorite character. There's going to be like the main character, and then there's going to be like the character that I kind of fall in love with. I think at first, if I'm remembering correctly, it was Gordo, because Gordo was kind of like immediately set up as like the doofus of the show. And then like, I think he definitely had like a really interesting arc as time went on. But then eventually I started to fall in love with all these different characters, and I started to fall in love with Karen and Tracy in particular when I found out like everything that she had gone through with her past, and Margot and everything that she has to go through. And even Ed to a certain extent. With Ed, I'm not going to lie, it kind of turned out to be my least favorite character, at least for the little bit. And they even managed to make me come back around with him and everything that unfortunately happens with his son. But Deke, and I'll admit, it was 100% biased towards Chris Bauer because I love him so much as an actor. And I think that even though he's the same thing and he's super reliable and everything, I always just love seeing him. And I always just love seeing his gruff demeanor because he plays the exact same thing in everything. He's always kind of like the gruff, tough dad figure, but he's always got that heart of gold. And I just loved seeing that from him. Like right from his opening scene where he's basically the guy that comes in and tells him, yeah, we lost. Get pissed and use that to motivate yourself, all the way up until the end where he is able to put aside, he is constantly given every single chance over and over again to be the guy that ends up like kind of taking away the advantages that everyone has to like kind of move forward and progress at like a much highly accelerated pace, and he never falls for it, and he always makes the right decision based solely on what he feels is the right decision. And to me, it's what makes him the most compelling character out of this first season. And it sucks because I'm so beyond sick of Chris Bauer showing up, rocking it for one season, and then leaving the show because he did the exact same thing on The Wire. And it sucks so hard because when he leaves the show, it's almost like he's completely forgotten about. And I don't want that to happen here because he was such an integral part of this first season. And now, obviously, knowing where the show is going to go and how it's good, and obviously again we're going to get to that when we talk about the premiere episode for season 2 and kind of showing where the legs are for that show to kind of continue into the future, kind of the more sci-fi routes that it's going to pursue. I don't want us to like kind of forget that. I don't want this show to make that mistake that most shows of this ilk do, which is they forget the human elements, because that to me is what made this so compelling in the first place. And it's again part of what made Deke's death among many other characters' death, because this is a first season that also, like many other shows that I feel like I've been missing from, there are a lot of people that die in this first season because they show that the space travel, it's not easy and it's hella dangerous.
Yeah, it's very realistic.
There can be big explosions, and there are a lot of people that die, and there's a lot of really sad, tragic deaths, and there are also deaths that happen far away from the space landing platform. Like the show is very, very in tune with the fact that death is a part of life, and they show that like this type of transformation is needed in order to like kind of progress us forward, and it's done in a way that actually feels tasteful. Like this show brought, for lack of a better word, tasteful death back to television, which is something that I feel like has been missing for a while now, you know?
Totally. I totally agree. And I think we do need to jump into season 2, episode 1, but I just want to first say one last thing about season 1. And if you guys watch this show, if anything, just put your phone down when you get to episode 7. Hi, Bob.
Yeah, I agree.
That is one of my favorite episodes of television I've seen in years. I was blown away. I mean, for these no-name actors really to just evoke this emotion and just embody and just dominate that episode, man. I'm talking about the Jamestown crew that's stranded, but also the B plot back on Earth just amplified it.
Yeah. It's really good. It's so good.
Do we want to just do a quick star rating for this first season?
Well, I mean, I was going to do star ratings at the end, but yeah, this is a 4.5 first season. Like this is an incredible, and it really sucks because this aired at like, I think this started roughly at the same time as the morning show ended, and I'm really pissed that I couldn't catch this in real time, because if it had, again, this would have been like when we were still doing the first season of the show, but this absolutely would have made my top 10 for shows that came out in 2019, and I'm really pissed that I missed it in real time. Like that's the only thing that I have to, that's kind of like the only nitpick that I have to say, because this was a truly fantastic first season of television.
Yeah, same. I'm gonna go 5 out of 5, man.
Wow.
This hit all the right.
It was this close for me. It was this close, but I think it was the episode length and towards the second half of the season. There were a couple plot lines in there. Not that many, but there were a couple where I'm like, oh, okay, this is we're doing this now, and this is the dialogue, and these are the exchanges that we're choosing. Okay, it was very, very few and far between. But for those last, particularly those last couple episodes, I was like, okay, but it's still, again, fantastic debut though.
I noticed some of that, and I think some of it is my bias for that Hi Bob episode, just being honestly some of the greatest filmmaking I've seen in a long time. But I forgave it very easily because this show, same as when we were talking about Silence of the Lambs yesterday, has the most nitpicky critiques of all critiques in the world, at least for the first season. So, Dom, season 2, episode 1, right?
Season 2, episode 1. So this episode was entitled Every Little Thing. It's directed by Michael Morris. There was a lot of returning directors and writers from the first season. Again, a notable inclusion, that being director Andrew Stanton, who directed the Pixar movies Finding Nemo and WALL-E, and has also directed several episodes of Stranger Things. Will be directing 2 episodes coming out this season. And almost immediately off the bat, again, it's really weird because this is kind of the first time where we're doing this, where we're kind of covering the entire first season of the show and then kind of jumping into kind of the recap section of the second season. But I think immediately off the bat, what this first episode demonstrated to me was showing, okay, we have the legs for, like, we could, if we wanted to, we could have this run for like a 4, 5, maybe 6 season arc, and we're going full sci-fi route. Like, the thing that I loved is that it did that thing that I love when shows can do, where they have their first season and they have the whole incredible self-contained story, and if you feel like it's so expansive and it sets up the world so well, and then the second season comes in and shows, oh no, you thought that was cool? We're just getting started. And that was the first thing that I noticed off of this episode. Like, the expansion of the colony in space, kind of where their relations are with Russia, how, like, how they did the time jumps, so they can show, like, how drastically things have changed for the characters, how they're going to get into some of these new characters that they do, because I love it when shows can actually bring in new characters that, you know, and kind of like bounce them off of, like, kind of, and change up kind of like the old dichotomies we've gotten used to. Again, there's so much that happened in this, but there was so much setup that happened as well for, like, the future of the season that, like, I don't know how much it is that, like, you want to talk about, like, plot wise with this episode, as opposed to, like, kind of where this is going to go in the future. But, like, what did this episode demonstrate to you, like, kind of compared to the whole fantastic first season that we watched, and where this is going to go? Because I don't know if you knew this, but similar to Ted Lasso, this has already gotten a 3rd season renewal.
Awesome. I didn't know that. Yeah. That just made my night.
I wasn't sure if you'd read that, but I saw that on the Wikipedia page. I'm like, wow, that just shows how much, unlike Netflix, how much confidence Apple has in their stock going forward, you know?
Yeah, totally, man. So yeah, season 2, episode 1, Every Little Thing, the Bob Marley reference, the Bob Marley song. You know, that's a significant year. 79 is the year that Bob Marley passes away. It's the year that song's #1. That message in that song is phenomenal. Paul McCartney touts that album as the greatest record of all time. And he was so culturally important. So again, they're just playing to their strengths, knowing their history. Even though it's revisionist, they still keep some of the actual reality of the world in there. And Every Little Thing really is so profound of a song to use because of the situations that the characters are in. And this show does what I love when dramas do, where they take their time. You know, they realize what worked in the first season and they kept it. And I'm going to specifically say the pace, because at first, you know, you're like, okay, 5-year time skip. Well, we're easing into this. I wonder what's going on with Ed and his wife. They lost their child. Is everything okay? But they're going to get there. They don't quite start off with Ed, you know? They start off with Margot, and she's running NASA now, and she's sleeping in her office. And, you know, we don't really know what happened to Aleda. We know they were close. She's gone. She hasn't come back. And they introduce all these new characters. And guess the point of what I'm trying to say is they take their time. They get you comfortable. And then the bomb drops, right? And we go and we revisit that opening sequence. And the filmmaking in this episode rivals Hi Bob for me, because I love that type of stuff, man. Yeah. I love that type of picking up where we left off, having the super calm, amazing moment where they could have just left that and had it have been them watching a beautiful sunrise. Yeah. But they know what they're doing. They know their audience.
They are doing.
And it was just brilliant. And you're right. it is more of a sci-fi edge this season, it seems. At least we don't really know what's going to happen.
But again, like that's what I like because it shows it. Like, yeah, these creators, they have, because I checked and researched, and the main guy who is the primary showrunner for this, his name is, let me look it up. His name is Ronald D, and he was a writer and executive producer on Star Trek and the reimagined Battlestar Galactica, and he's also worked on Outlander. So yeah, this guy knows.
Battlestar 2008.
Battlestar 2000. I'm checking right now, but yeah. So Ronald D. Moore. Yep. The reimagined Battlestar Galactica that came out in the 04 to 09 run.
That is the greatest. Oh my God! Yeah. No wonder I like
these guys know what they're doing, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I feel so confident because we have moon bases, we have Russians building up their forces, we have Americans building up their forces, we have. Now, the military is stationed right there in the control room, which used to be the family screening room. Well, now it's the Pentagon. And guess what? Be careful what you say, as Margot learned in this episode, because clearly, while you can be friendly with them, there are two different ideologies at work here. And we didn't really see too much of that in the first season. We saw it a little bit halfway through. But so they're introducing new elements on top of this old formula, and I'm very intrigued. It's hard to speak to the quality of the season. This was a quality episode. It was obviously just as well done. I want to see where it goes, man. And I got to say, this hooked me. I mean, you take it away, Dom. Like, are you as hooked as I am?
The only thing that I have to say about this is, yes, obviously I am hooked. I think that this episode immediately established that the show has legs and they absolutely know what they're doing. And I think they're absolutely going to have another interstellar, pun intended that time, season. Hopefully, unlike that god-awful unintentional pun that I made last night. Oh my God, I still hate myself for having made that. You know what I'm talking about. That might be one of the worst jokes I've ever made, and you guys are all gonna know what I'm talking about when you guys see the first time watch tomorrow. But yeah, no, this immediately shows to me that these creators, they have a long-term vision for this show, which again, I am so beyond grateful for, because it so feels like with every show that's come out recently, they're like, they got to throw everything they can into one season because they have no idea if they're going to get a renewal or not. And these guys are fully confident that they are I mean, they had enough in that first season to have it have been like a perfect one-off if they had chosen to end it there. But the fact that they're going with just as hard, if not harder, for season 2, and they're going in and like fully doubling down on like, okay, these are like kind of all the new things that have been established in this alternative history. Now we're gonna play around with them even more, and now we're gonna basically explore like the paranoia state, but in a whole new way. And we're gonna explore like kind of like, you guys have seen moon bases and stuff. Now you guys are gonna see like kind of the rough and tumble stuff that it's gonna take in order to establish those moon bases, and we're gonna get into even crazier sci-fi techniques. Like we saw like some radiation poisoning, and we might unfortunately have to end up saying goodbye to another character a lot sooner than we were probably anticipating. Yeah. And it's just all of that stuff, and it's all just in one episode. Like, I am beyond excited that we finally caught up and that we're going to be able to watch this in real time. I cannot wait to see where this season goes overall. Like, oh man, like I'm excited. This is the first new show in a while that I'm really, really excited for, to see where this goes.
Same, man. And let me just say, speaking of, because you raised a good point there, it's like, everyone just jumps to being on the moon, being fully colonized. We're actually seeing them build beacons and mine rocks and conquer new valleys and name new areas. And the pacing is just complementing this show so perfectly. But also what I think is something I've never brought up on the show before, the art direction department. Yes. This doesn't look like an alien's going to pop out of the ventilation in the ceiling. It looks like it's militaristic. It has that NASA feel. It's very much so in the vein of what it is. It's not selling you something that it's not, it's people going out there and trying to conquer the new frontier. And it has that look. It doesn't have that typical generic space look. Like, I'm loving The Expanse, like I said, and that's a completely different show. That's a little more, I would call, hokey sci-fi. This is a little more rooted in reality, because we might be able to do this one day, but they're walking the walk and they're talking the talk, like I said earlier. And I'm all for it, man. Like, I can't really, I don't want to dilute all the positive sentiments I've said about this show and this episode so far, because again, it was only season 2, episode 1, but I'm in. I'm fully locked in. And I'm loving this ride.
I mean, all that I can say, at the risk of like kind of diluting all of my previous points, what's up, Matt? Happy to have you here. Happy to have you jump in last minute. Is that, I'm full speed ahead. as far as I'm concerned. Like I cannot wait to see where this show goes. It sucked having to say goodbye to the characters that I was not expecting to. Again, like this show made me fall in love and then made me say goodbye to characters within 10 episodes. Like Chris, I don't think you understand. I haven't had that happen for me since Game of Thrones. I have not done that with a show since Game of Thrones. And I'm so glad that I have a show back that can actually do that. Like, man, I'm so beyond excited. I can't wait to see what's going to happen with Ed and Gordo and Karen and Tracy and Molly and all these other incredible, and Margot, incredibly rich and incredibly impressive characters that I've seen. I guess I want to see like, and just this show like made me like aware of the fact of like how endless the possibilities are for where they can go. Like if this is where they are in 79, like, and the fact that we're still like heaped in the space race in the 80s in this alternative version, like how are they going to mix and mesh like the pop culture movement of the 80s with the space race? Like just the possibilities alone have me like, whoa, and they're going to have like more of a sci-fi edge. Like, are we going to end up seeing like dogfights in space? Like, I don't know where this is going to go, you know?
That'd be crazy, man. And I love how fearless they seem to be. You know, most shows wouldn't want to do, let alone time jumps within their first season, time jumps in between the second season that are so drastic, years.
Usually that's something that for me that kills a show. Like when I see them jump ahead, it's like, oh, so they just had no interest and they just like needed a new story. And this was like the gimmick that they had in order to like effectively retcon everything. But then this is the first time where I feel like it's actually important towards the story. And I loved it.
But then the last thing I will say, because I agree with all that, even though time has passed, they still remember who these characters are and where they come from. I'm talking about Ed's wife when they obviously have the daughter, whether they adopted her. I'm assuming they did because there's no way they could have raised a child in 5 years like that. Either way, they show that they're moving on as a couple. They're doing good, but then she goes outside. She's smoking that joint, which she picked up from Molly's husband.
Yep.
And she looks up and, you know, she's not looking up to see other astronauts. Her husband's on Earth. You know, it's an homage to their son who unfortunately, you know, suffered a bad fate, is no longer with them. But they don't need to like, they just have that skill, that tact of yesteryear where that's all you need. Because a good show doesn't need to say everything. It doesn't need to feed you exposition for every single thought in every single character's head.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, no,
it's brilliant.
Yeah, it's brilliant. Like this, I mean, I feel like we've said everything that we need to about this show. Yes. Like, I'm very much looking forward to continuing to watch the show. I'm glad to have a show back that I can watch week to week. That's not a Disney Marvel show that I can actually look forward to. Same. Like, I miss my HBO Sunday nights, man. I'm telling you, like, I got those became like a really, really special moment because, like I said, HBO kind of like reawakened me to what TV was capable of in early high school when I was watching Sopranos and watching those early seasons of Game of Thrones and watching Entourage and True Blood, and I was first starting to get into The Wire and Boardwalk Empire. Like those shows were like really, really special to me, you know? And like part of the fun for me of college was getting into all the new and crazy different shows that came out. A lot of them were letdowns and a lot of them I feel like got canceled before they had a chance to come into their own. But the ones that stuck around and the ones that were awesome. And I'm glad that we have now other streaming services that are giving these types of shows an actual chance to flourish. And I'm like, it's part of the joy of me of seeing like kind of this new kind of the future of where the medium is going to be, you know, is now that we're finally getting the chance to have some of these new shows. And so far, if this is the future of Apple content, like full speed ahead is all that I can say about this. This was an incredible debut for a sophomore debut. It does not seem like it's going to fall victim to the sophomore slump of TV shows at all. Again, another 4.5 episode, incredible debut. I can't wait to see where the rest of this season goes.
Yeah, I mean, we'll be honest, if it does fall short, I can't see that happening, but this is where you can come to yeah, exactly. This is where you can come for that. But man, I'm locked in. They did everything they needed to do. This was the debut they needed, and it's the debut that we got, and I loved it. It's a 4.5 for me. I want to say 5, but I got to see where it goes. I don't want to put all my money where my mouth is. Yeah. This was a lot of fun, man. I'm glad we're doing something new and different.
Yeah, we ended February with something different. We gave Apple the much needed shout out that it deserved, and I'm hoping that in the future people will come back and see this specific episode as the episode that finally put the show on the map. Because I'm not gonna lie, it seems to be pulling the Succession route where the first season came, it was watched by the people who watched it, they liked it, and now that the second season is coming out, it's gonna roll up and it's gonna be even bigger. I think you're gonna see this with this show, and you're gonna see it with Kim's. I think Kim's, especially when Shang-Chi comes out, like this could finally be these shows' moments, and this could finally be like kind of the emergence of like the new TV shows that we're going to see going forward. And it certainly gives me hope. It gives me a lot more hope than the movies. That's all I'm going to say about that. But with that being said, that was our episode on For All Mankind. fine. We hope that you guys definitely check this show out if you haven't already. The first season is entirely available on Apple TV, and the second season, the first episode is available, and the next couple of episodes will be rolling out throughout the next couple of weeks. It's going to be very fascinating and very interesting to keep up with this show week to week. As always, guys, we have new content that we put up on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. We've got our Silence of the Lambs first time watch coming out on Wednesday, and our episode where we'll be recapping WandaVision's 8th episode this coming Friday. Again, stay tuned because we're going to have a lot of crazy stuff coming down the pipeline in March. Again, we've got Raya and the Last Dragon. We've got Coming to America, the Snyder Cut. We're covering the Russo brothers' new movie that's going to Apple TV. Godzilla vs. Kong to wrap up the month. We've got an interview with another Kim's Convenience and the Expanse actor. We've got a lot of stuff, to say the least, overall. And to me, the biggest thing that I feel like we haven't got to talk about, Chris, it's going to be our 1-year anniversary on YouTube, dude. Like, I don't know about you. I'm pretty stoked about that. I'm planning on pulling out all the stops for that one. Like, we're going to have like a couple of like just randomly going live celebrations this month of March, but that one might be the one that I'm looking forward to the most. Like, just seeing like where we started on YouTube versus where we are now. Because like, dude, if you ever want like a trip just to see how far we've come, go back and watch that first Lost episode that we did on the YouTube channel. Man, that shit is a trip. Like,
I will. I guess I'll have to.
Like when I was making those shitty opening clips for Instagram, like, oh man, it's giving me flashbacks to a year ago, just like everything that we were able to accomplish during the pandemic. But yeah, people, as always, you guys know the drill. Leave the comments in the comment section below. Make sure to click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the bell next to it. That way you guys get notified every time we put up new content. Again, just your subscriptions help with us being able to give you guys the content that you want to keep watching. So that way it makes you guys keep coming back here. That way we can justify continuing to put out all the content that we have been putting out on a pretty consistent basis, I would like to think. Chris, you've been hyping up some projects that you've got coming out a lot, so continue to hype, my man. Like, when is that stuff coming out that you're working on?
Yeah, thanks, Tom. I'm working on my comeback record. Let's start calling it that, because that's what it's going to be. I've been in bands my whole life, and now I'm going solo, as they like to say, and I'm excited about it. I haven't written this intensely in quite a long time, and I really believe in these songs, and so I'll keep you guys updated on the process. We're still fairly in the earlier stages, but I can't wait for you guys to hear it, so that's why I'm hyping it up now. And if you want to follow the journey, pretty soon, like in a month or so, I'm going to be start releasing little teasers, little snippets, let you into my process, get you behind what I'm thinking and what you can expect. And you can find all that type of stuff on any of my social medias at Christian Ivanko. It'll be in the description below. Yeah, I can't wait for you guys to hear it, man. I'm very excited for it, and thanks for letting me tell them all about that, Dom.
Of course, and you guys can follow me on Facebook and Instagram at Movie Nerd Reviews, where I occasionally spoil things about WandaVision, and I occasionally just go off on certain people who I think are dumb. But most importantly, you can find me here on Instagram and Facebook on our stuff, the Talkin TV podcast, which is, of course, the thing that gives me motivation to live overall. Click the like button and the follow button on each of those social media platforms. Again, that way you guys can stay updated for what our new stuff will be coming out. As always, people, 12 seasons in a short film, and watch For All Mankind, because it's fucking great. Watch more fucking movies and TV. We'll see you guys next time.